Chad from France, a milestone that invites reflection on its political and economic journey, as well as its role in the region. The country has faced significant challenges, including political instability, economic hardship, and regional security issues. To help us explore these issues, we're joined by Dr. Darrin McDonald, lecturer in politics and international relations at Leeds Beckett University, who specializes in the political economy of global development. Dr. McDonald, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much. So let's start here first in terms of how you would summarize Chad's political evolution since its independence. It gained it in 1960 in context of regional and global affairs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Chad's a really interesting case of sort of the almost archetypal African experience since independence, having obviously dealt with a lot of instability, and long-term sort of authoritarian leadership, particularly under his Senabre. And I think sort of that accompanied by corruption and sort of regional instability and spillover from that has really just made it a very difficult path for Chad over the last 65 years, in terms of taking advantage of resources, and sort of delivering on promises for democracy and opening the political space and these types of really important measures of development. I think, yeah, there's been a sort of multiplicity of factors that have really sort of hindered Chad's path in a lot of ways.
When we talk of major internal and external challenges that Chad faces today that affect its sovereignty and stability, what would stand out for you on this point? I guess on the internal challenges, we were just talking in the news now about the former prime minister and who's now opposition leader, Sukse Masra, who's been sentenced to 20 years in prison for disseminating racist and xenophobic messages that incited violence. I don't know, maybe if we can start there then, in terms of internal challenges that could affect the country's stability and democracy, and then we'll go to the external ones.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, Success Masra is a really important example of some of the key challenges that Chad continues to face when it comes to governance and when it comes to the openness of its political space. Obviously, with the fall of Idris Deby in 2021, and now the sort of presidency of Mahatma Deby, there's been an important sort of degree of continuity and continued dominance by the regime and by the ruling party that has unfortunately sort of kept the political space very closed
Mm.
in Chad, and resulted in a fair bit of domestic violence, particularly around pro-democracy protests and these types of events. And yeah, I think success is just sort of the latest instance of these efforts to sort of crack down on political openness and crack down on opposition ultimately, in this I guess vein of maintaining security and maintaining uh, you know uh, the regime's position and ability to impact upon the broader sort of regional issues that we'll probably get into shortly.
External challenges?
Externally, I think it is really the extent of regional instability that Chad is currently facing. Chad obviously takes a very major role in a lot of the regional organizations when it comes to sort of peacekeeping, particularly against sort of insurgent and jihadist groups. And obviously with recent coups in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, ongoing instability in Sudan, and elsewhere in the region, the sort of spillover and more so the way that that's kind of challenged Chad's role within the region has been a really important sort of instance. Chad, particularly under Idris Deby, has always played a really important role in regional security, both in terms of at times stoking insecurity, but more recently in terms of playing a very prominent role in sort of military interventions against regional insurgents and jihadist groups. So I think the spillover and the threat of coup contagion and continued instability is perhaps why we see the regime acting the way that we see it acting as well,
Mm.
because obviously beyond the sort of regional concerns, we do have the ongoing sort of rebel group with rebel sort of battles within the north of Chad itself. And I think that sort of compounding security threats tend to sort of supersede other desires when it comes to democracy or development. And so yeah, I think that regional security landscape really complicates domestic circumstances and conditions for Chad as well.
So, how can Chad strengthen its position both regionally and globally moving forward? It's located in the Sahel and Central African region.
Yeah, I think that's a difficult question ultimately. I think a lot of it comes down to doing things a little bit differently, if I'm being completely honest. I think Chad needs to sort of recognize that by closing its own political space and by prioritizing security and giving in to these threats by securitizing politics and securitizing Chad's governance, I think that ultimately is one of the sort of biggest sort of issues as far as how Chad has responded. And I think if Chad is to really achieve its goals when it comes to development, when it comes to actually being able to take advantage of relatively vast natural resources, I think that comes down to not only sort of building up partnerships as it has been fairly successful in doing with international partners from the West and Russia and what have you, but I think also as I've mentioned, I think it comes down to improving domestic governance, improving the actual legitimacy and reactivity of the Chaldean state to make it be able to sort of posture and portray itself as a sort of a beacon of hope, I suppose, within the region.
Your message, Doctor, in terms of the people of Chad and their leadership about the future as they mark this milestone.
I think Chad's at an important turning point in its history. I think this is a really important time and moment for Chadians to deliver on the promises of independence. I think ultimately, you know, Chad, just like any other country that gained independence 65 years plus ago, it wants to progress. It wants to develop. And I think as we saw during the political transition prior to Mohammed Debi's election, the Chadian populace wants democracy, and they want their social needs to be met. The majority of Chadians are still living in poverty, and still feel like they don't really have a voice within the Chadian state, and obviously Chadian partners, foreign and domestic, tend to prioritize security because of the regional security landscape and because of Chad's very specific history with
Mm.
insecurity. But I think ultimately this is a time of hope for Chad. I think it is a time when, if the people continue to press their government and the government perhaps actually begins to listen to its people, I think this is a time that can be a really important turning point and
Mhm.
moment for Chad to progress and achieve its actual goals when it comes to being a regional beacon of development and democracy.
Thank you so much again for your time, Dr. McDonald. We'll leave it there for today.
That's lovely. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks for making time. Dr. Darrin McDonald is lecturer in politics and international relations at Leeds Beckett University, sharing some insights on Chad's political and economic journey as the country marks 65 years of independence on this 11th of August. Let's get our news headlines. It's 7:31 Central African time. Good morning, Onele.
SABC